My brief is to talk about the policy lessons from Sprint. And if you have the next slide, please. At the heart of long-term care is a paradox, is that we know that demand will be growing very fast, supply will be growing less, might even be shrinking. And we also know that there are quite a lot of difficulties of handling it, because we have, on the one hand, we have the interface with healthcare. On the other hand, we have the interface with the family. And despite this, there's very little discussion in many places about long-term care. It's as if we, society or decision makers, think that the problems have been solved. And the problem, the really issue about long-term care is the governance issues, that it seems to be very easy to dodge the questions rather than answer them. So, if you have the next slide, please. So everybody talks about how heterogeneous long-term care is. So at first glance, this presupposes that it's very hard to come up with any kind of general recommendation. So despite this, we were quite surprised to find six surprisingly firm policy guidelines. Now, the point is, these guidelines come up from applying a social investment as a unifying narrative. This unifying narrative manages to bring three things together: theory, practice, and measurement. So it assigns places to all these three things and allows the discussion to move forward, and allows situations which are thought to fall in different boxes to actually be considered together. And it allows, for example, certain countries with developed long-term care systems to actually look in other countries which non-developed social care, long-term care systems, and actually find useful things to take up. Now, just to look forward, I mean, because we're in Parliament, and long-term care at the moment, it seems to me, is at a similar stage of development than the discussion of social inclusion and poverty was in the mid-90s. At that time, the matters was considered too heterogeneous, too different. We shouldn't be talking. But there was a confluence of people theory and measurement, and also, quite importantly, there was political will at some stage. And the open method of coordination in those countries which were already dealing with poverty was no big deal, but in other countries such as my own in Greece, incidentally, I'm Platon Tinios. I forgot to introduce myself. I thought you all knew me. I'm very famous, but there we are. I come from Greece, despite my accent. So, and Greece is a sort of country that we all talked about poverty, but did very little about it because it wasn't measured. And suddenly somebody came along and offered some measurement which came out of Brussels regularly, and then the politicians and decision makers were actually made to face the problems. I think we're in a similar situation now in long-term care. So we came with 5 policy guidelines. The first one, of course, is that social investment has value to add. The important thing is it has value to add, possibly in those countries which are least developed. In a country which already has a well-developed planning system, then implementing social investment guidelines might be simply a decision taken at the high level. But in countries which are very decentralized, then social investment can actually take you a long way. The second is that you need to build a strong evidence base. What I mentioned is that you need indicators. These indicators have to be indicators of outcomes, not processes, not how much you spend, but what is the ultimate effect that you have on spending. And that effect includes the welfare and things which are not easily measured, not only of those receiving care, but quite crucially on those supplying care, the carers. And the evidence base includes production of data, but also includes the ability to analyze the data. which is the issues which are mentioned repeatedly about how do you interpret evidence, how do you measure non-monetary welfare issues. Next. And you need a legal and regulatory framework within member states. The key issue there is flexibility. In order to apply social investment, you have to have the leeway to be able to take decisions. If your hands are tied, then social investment can't give you very much. So flexibility. But at a very important, we're at an important juncture, and it was mentioned repeatedly, in the European Union, is actually able to take the lead and to take the lead so that member states can go forward and apply social investment. The European Pillar of Social Rights was mentioned, and that can be a lever which can get member states moving in the direction of social investment and taking long-term care seriously. I mean, this is what the ultimate thing. So it's not that we just like talking about social investment. The point is that social investment is a tool which gets us to a destination that we think is worthwhile. The fourth is engaging with stakeholders. Engaging with stakeholders is important because they can have different viewpoints, but it's also important for another reason, is that it can provide gaps in our knowledge. The people who actually work on long-term care can actually give us leads that, things that researchers might find very hard to measure, and decisions that that people a long way away can find difficult. People who have hands-on experience might be able to deal, because they have to deal with them on a day-to-day basis. The fifth issue is building a dedicated social investment infrastructure. That could include, for example, innovative mechanism, innovative investment we mentioned. In Sprint, we spent quite a lot of time looking at the case of social enterprises in Italy, for example, in a country which is where long-term care as a public concern is not very developed. Civil society was able to take the lead and come up with some innovative solutions. Social impact bonds in the UK are one way of forging a partnership between the public and private sectors. And the sixth is actually operationalizing social investment. Social investment is a great thing for talking, and academics love it, of course, because it brings us, second-year economics, social cost-benefit analysis. Oh, yes, I remember that. Great. I can actually think of something to say. That is very easy. But the point about social investment is it must be operationalized. It must be shown to have use at the coalface, as it were. I mean, the people who are dealing with the problems have to be given social investment pools to play with. And we did produce such a tool. It's there to be used, and it's there mainly to be improved, because that tool combines information from measurement and knowledge, and allows people also to exercise their judgment in producing both micro and macro points. So, and the final thing, just some final thoughts, that the baby boom generation that's coming into retirement and will, in the next 10 or 20 years, start needing long-term care, were used to operating in the realm of production. That essentially what you were, happiness could be bought, essentially. Now, long-term care brings you into a different world. Even if you have the money, it's not enough. You have you're in the realm of solidarity. And the point is that this is happening at the time when the general environment is increasingly monetized and is much more fiscally aware. So how to counterbalance this? We think that social investment has a role to play. it's, well.
Thank you. Yes, we got the message. I think we got that message. Thank you very much, Platon. Thank you very much for introducing that.